channel. It's Chelsea, where we talk about all things glam and all things girly. I am a beauty enthusiast that loves to talk about everything dealing with beauty and makeup, and today we got my favorite eyeshadow palettes of 2021. And guys, this one, I think this one is a good one, and I'm not ranking them because that's going to be too hard. But I will give you, why I like this palette and all of that good stuff. I will tell you what my number one is, and if you know me, you probably already know what my number one is. But we will get into all of that. I cannot wait for this video. So thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I truly do appreciate it. And let's get right into this video. So first, let's talk about what is actually on my eyes. And oh my goodness, when this palette came out, I could not get enough of it, and I still can't get enough of it. And it is probably my favorite pink palette of all time. Maybe not of all time, but she is definitely within the top 3. And this is the Pat McGrath Eternal Eden Quad. So this is the eyeshadow palette. I love every single shade in this palette. These two matte shades have a very creamy formula. I'm actually wearing this shade right here as blush today. I kind of went a little ham on the blush, but it's okay. It's okay because she's cute. I also used it on the eyes. I used this particular shade on the eyes as the center kind of like spotlight of the eye look. I also have used it as a highlight today, and she's really cute. It's a highlight on the sides of my cheeks and down the middle. I can't say enough good things about this palette. If you love pink-based eyeshadow palettes, you're gonna want this one. Every particular shade blends out so beautifully on the eye. There's not a formula in here that is just, I love them all. For this metallic shade, the best way to use it, in my opinion, is to press the eyeshadow on the eye with either your finger or your brush. If you swipe it, you will get a lot of fallout. So if you press it on the eye, you get less fallout, and then you get more impact from the shade. But I can't say enough good things about it. I truly enjoy this quad. It is one, like I said, it's definitely within my top 3 of like my favorite pink-based eyeshadow palette. So love, 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 love that eyeshadow quad. Going in next with an eyeshadow palette that I just got an email today stating it is back in stock at Beautylish. We have the Wayne Goss Pearl eyeshadow palette, and this one is a stunner. So I want to say this came out like springtime of this year, maybe early summer. And it looks quite cool tone, just kind of looking at it in the pan, and looks quite light. But one thing about Wayne Goss's eyeshadows that has never failed so far is that what the shade looks like in the pan definitely shows up more intense and deeper on the skin. His eyeshadow palettes are also like Pat McGrath's eyeshadow palettes and quads, where we can wear these on the eyes, but we can also wear them on the face. So this is a beautiful highlight against my complexion, and this is also a blush shade that actually does show up on me as a very light, fair blush, but not ashy, just a light blush. All of these shades are so beautiful, and I truly enjoy this one. So you can definitely wear this for, your more simple, everyday types of looks, but you can kind of jazz up this palette, smoke it out a bit, especially with this shade here, and get a really beautiful look. So happy this is back in stock. Love it. Another eyeshadow palette from Wayne Goss, because y'all know I love Wayne Goss, so that's nothing new here. The Tourmaline eyeshadow palette. This is another beautiful one, and this is his most recent one. And this one I feel like is like the deeper, kind of like sexier version of Pearl. Pearl and Tourmaline definitely don't look the same, so don't take it like they look the same, but I look at both of them and I'm like, daytime, evening looks. So we could definitely do daytime looks with this one, but we have deeper tones. I think this palette is definitely more suitable for all complexions, especially those complexions that are deeper. I feel like Pearl, if you have a deeper complexion, you're not gonna be able to use every one of these shades to get the type of look that you want, because they might be too light just for that palette alone. Whereas I feel like Tourmaline, if you have a deeper and richer complexion, you could probably use this palette very easily in terms of using one palette and getting the look that you want. Really enjoy this one as well. And once again, I can use this shade as a highlight. I can always also use this shade as a highlight. And it's just a stunning palette. Love, love, love these palettes. I have traveled with definitely Pearl, not Tourmaline yet, but I have definitely traveled with Pearl, and I will be traveling with Tourmaline in the future. Oh my goodness me. This next eyeshadow palette, I could not get enough of it. Patrick Ta Major Dimensions eyeshadow palette. When I saw it, I was like, oh, this looks so pretty. I definitely want to try it. You know, we have 2 cream base eyeshadows here and these shades. So I'm like, you know, I could always use another beautiful neutral eyeshadow palette. But for me, this wasn't just a simple everyday neutral eyeshadow palette. It just has a little pizzazz to it. And I laugh because I'm like, these are truly just like everyone's standard neutral shades, but the formulation for this palette is what made this palette so special for me. So the mattes blended just so beautifully. And then we have these metallic shades here. And then I forgot the other formulation of it. So we've got like a metallic shade, more so of like a shimmer crystal like shade. And then, like I said, we have 2 cream eyeshadows here. So I felt like even though we were looking at like a neutral eyeshadow palette and that looked pretty standard, the formulations were not standard. So that just made it so special for me. And I reached for this palette so much. Right when it came out, into like a couple months after that, I wore this all through the summer, and I haven't reached for it in like the past couple of months, but like it's still one that I do reach for when I want to go for like a really beautiful neutral look. I love this palette. Can't sing its praises enough. And no, it may not be like a need for everybody, but my goodness, I do not regret a dime being spent on that palette. I really don't regret any of these palettes that I have purchased. Some of these I have been gifted, but the ones that I have been gifted, I know I would have purchased anyway. So I love each and every one of them, and I think they're just amazing. Okay, then I forgot this palette came out this year until I looked back at my videos. I was like, oh yes, that did come out this year. Natasha Denona's Trio Chrome palette. Does this not scream spring? Easter egg hunts. Like, this is such a beautiful spring palette. And for me, I do and did primarily use this palette earlier in the year. This is not a palette that I would reach for this time of the year. Like, depending on what shade I wanted, I could, you know, obviously make a look that I feel is like winter appropriate. But this is more so a spring palette for me. But I not only love the shades, but I really love the formulation. I think this is another beautifully formulated palette by Natasha. These mattes blend so effortlessly, and then you have these 3 shimmer shades in the middle that have a multi-dimensional shift to them. So I really enjoyed this one. This was a palette that, like, when I saw it, I was just like, I'm gonna get it because, you know, I buy all her eyeshadow palettes, but I don't really know how much I'm gonna like it. And I was very shocked by how much I did like it. But also the formulation is very, very good. Okay. Here is one that is not new, but I waited so long to get it, and then it kept going out of stock, and I at one point thought I wasn't going to be able to get it, and then I finally got it. By Natasha as well. And we have Miss Leela. I have waited so long for Leela, and I finally got this palette earlier in the year. I want to say like around early summer, and I don't know why it took me so long to purchase it, but I finally got it. And I'm so glad that I have it. So this palette is definitely a palette that I will reach for when I want a nice purple toned look. And I really don't have too many eyeshadow palettes that have a purple based theme to it. So I reach for this palette pretty often for that reason. But I really enjoy that it's not like completely only purple. You know, I've got my pinks in here because y'all know I love pinks. And then I love that there's a mixture of neutral shades and cooler shades for this eyeshadow palette. It is quite stunning, and I think the formulation is better than the Sunset palette. Maybe not her best formula, but this is by far nowhere close to being like a bad formula at all. I would put this palette formulation wise, I would put it at the top of my Natasha palettes. Like, it's definitely not going to be like maybe top 3, like amongst all of the eyeshadows that she makes. And I'm talking like large pans, midi size, and mini sizes. So like, we're talking a lot of eyeshadow palettes here, but the formulation is still really good. The mattes blend very well, so there's no skipping, there's no patchiness. So I really enjoy this one. I think I got this one on sale, and I'm very happy that I got it on sale, but I actually would not have been disappointed if I would have paid full price for it, formulation-wise and color story-wise. So I really enjoy this one. It still sits in my drawer that I have next to my desk for palettes that I want to reach for on a more consistent basis. It still sits there, so that lets you know something. Now this next one is a newer eyeshadow palette that I got very recently, but I have used it a good amount of time. And it is the Charlotte Tilbury Smoky Eyes Are Forever Instant Palette. You guys, this one, I sat on this for a very long time. I did not buy this when it first came out. I did not buy it like shortly after it first came out. I really waited on this palette and I regret that I waited. I have come to realize that all of her instant palettes like this are worth the buy because the formula of them is so good. The formula in these is definitely better than some of her quads that she has come out with, like some of the older quads, not some of the newer ones, because her newer quads, I really feel like she has like just come through with making that formulation so good. But this formula in this palette it's so good. Mattes are excellent, very intense. This black, I have used this black as an actual winged liner on a couple of occasions, and it looks like I use like maybe a black crayon versus just using eyeshadow. So intense, doesn't skip, nothing patchy about any of these mattes. And then the shimmers are not flaky, they're not you like scared or anything. Like they really are like, we are impactful, we're gonna make a statement, but you don't have to be concerned with, you know, them being too intense if you are not someone who likes a lot of that intensity. It's so great. And I also love this color story that she has within this palette. So highly recommend this one. Like I said, it hasn't been in my collection too long, but like I have used it enough to where I have to recognize it as a palette that if I would have bought it earlier this year, like when it first came out, I would have definitely been using it from that point up until now. So that's why it's in here. Okay, we got another Pat McGrath palette. Pat McGrath came out with some hits this year, and Utopian Dream definitely was one of them. So here is Mothership 9. Love, love, love this palette. I love this color story. These two shades, I'm telling you, when spring comes, watch out. These two shades are gonna be all over the place because I look at these two and I'm like, these are such springy shades. I like to wear both of these shades as blushes. This shade is stunning on the eyes. I like to use this one as a highlight. Once again, taking an eyeshadow palette and making it multi-purposeful. And I love that about Pat McGrath's eyeshadow palettes. Formulation is great, and I really like the mattes that she put in this palette as well. So very happy with this palette. I really do need to go and re-rank Pat McGrath's because we need to figure out where this one falls in. I can't make that decision just yet because I'm still feeling her out compared to like what my number one was. I don't know. That is some tough competition right there. But Utopian Dream is definitely like, if you're new to Pat McGrath and you're like, I want a mothership, what should I start out with? Oh my gosh, that's just such a loaded question. But depending on what you like, Utopian Dream might be one of my recommendations as like one of the first ones to start out with, you know, depending on like what you like and what you're going for and, you know, all of those things. Okay, another palette that I was like, yes, yes, oh my goodness. Natasha Denona Circo Loco palette. This palette, first of all, is this not the most fun palette that you've seen by the brand? This is the most fun palette that I have seen from the brand. We have such bright colors, definitely reminds me of like circus theme here. But more than that, because you know, colors can be great, but if the formula is not good, then it's just, the formulation for this is spitfire good. I mean, it is spitfire good. I would definitely put this at the top of like her best formulated eyeshadow palettes. This would definitely be up there as in the top 3, especially for like the larger palettes. I love everything about this palette. Definitely will be using this more in the spring. Once again, this is not a palette for me that I would use around this time of the year. Like I would use probably these shades for this time of the year, but this is more so a spring-based palette for me. But I love this one, and like I said, every time I use it, I'm just like, yes, formula, yes, formula. It's so, so good. I was very happy when I saw her come out with this because we typically see colors with Natasha, but not like this. And so I was very excited when it came out, and I was like, that just looks like I'm gonna get up in there and come out looking like a beautiful clown, but like in a good way, in a good way, not a bad way, but in a good way. So really enjoyed that one. Very excited to see what she's gonna come out with for this upcoming spring, because I hope it's something that's just as fun and like entertaining as Circo Loco. Okay, down to my last three, and then I have an honorable mention because, you know, well, I guess I could talk about, I'm gonna just keep it as an honorable mention. Oh, okay, so we've got a theme here, Natasha and Pat McGrath. Natasha, Pat McGrath, because those were just the palettes that did it for me. So this next one, Natasha. But Biba, okay, Biba is not new to 2021. We all know that. But Biba was new to me in this year of our Lord AD 2021. And yo, I was like, this palette is like Patrick Ta's Major Dimensions. We look at it and we're just like, okay, it's a nice neutral palette. Nice neutral palette. But you start mixing these things together and we start getting these looks together and you're like, yes. I mean, this is like wedding day, smoky look, work appropriate, night with the girls, one and done eyeshadow looks, like all in one type of palette. I have used this palette so many times for so many different occasions, and every time I use this palette, I am always satisfied with the look that I get. And what I love most about this palette is that it doesn't matter, like it's gotten to the point that when I look into this palette, I can literally see various looks that I want, which makes it so easy to use the palette. Does that make sense? It's like I can look at this palette and go, yes, I want this, 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 and this. There's the look in like 5 minutes. It looks like I spent more than 5 minutes, but it came together very quickly and it's just stunning. And I love when like an eyeshadow palette and I mix together, like our chemistry bonds together, and it's like, yes, we like we're in sync. We are in sync, and that's how I feel about Biba. Biba and I are in sync, and I love it. I truly, that is how Patrick Ta and I were. We were in sync, and that's why that palette and I vibe so much together. Like, Biba is like a staple in my eyeshadow palette collection. It's one of those eyeshadow palettes where I may not have it like blatantly across my channel all the time, but it is that palette that gets used so much, and it is that palette that will always be in a yearly favorites, whether I talk about it or not. Okay, so down to the last two. These have been by far my two favorite palettes that came out this year. Hands down, no questions asked. You already know what these two palettes are, and now I have to actually tell you which one is my absolute favorite. And I know which one's my absolute favorite. So let me tell you about good old Pat McGrath, Celestial Odyssey. When I saw Celestial Odyssey, and now I feel like a broken record at this point, but you clicked on the video, so you're gonna hear it again. And if you're new, you're gonna hear it for the first time. I saw this palette, I said, this is a beautiful Christmas themed palette. I'm gonna buy it because it's Pat McGrath, and I buy all Pat McGrath palettes, and that's what it is. And I will probably use it and enjoy it and keep it moving. Oh, but what I did not know was how much I was gonna fall in love with this palette, and how much this palette is not just a Christmas palette, okay? This is an all-in-one, all-encompassing, full year's worth of a palette, because we do have colors in here that are seasonally appropriate for winter, but then we see spring colors, summer colors, fall, and then we're back at winter. And the formula, ma'am, sir, the formula is so spot on. Mattes blend beautifully. The shimmers are so impactful. We've got metallics in here that are not crumbly and flaky, but they're very smooth and blendable. Oh my goodness. And just the color choices of this palette, this really could be like a one and done palette in terms of, I only have one eyeshadow palette, but I get the most looks from it. I really feel like Celestial Odyssey can do that. I really do. It's such a beautiful one. I love it. When I told you all, I made a video talking about, I think it was like my favorite palettes from Sephora this year. I put Celestial Odyssey as #1 because I was like, this palette is just a one and done eyeshadow palette, and no matter what occasion I need, this palette can give me a look, okay? But the other palette that really was like the palette that left me speechless this year at the time is not sold at Sephora. So I did not put that as my number one because I was like, I'm talking about palettes that are at Sephora, and this one is not at Sephora yet. But now it is at Sephora, and the number one palette of the year for me that literally left me speechless, that reignited a fire in me for artistry, like makeup artistry, none other than Danessa Myricks Lightworks 3 palette. This palette, when I say left me so speechless, I was so excited. Like, if you watched my review, I was just full of emotions. I mean, if it was another day, I probably would have been in tears, and I'm not exaggerating. I was not ready for what this palette brought to me and my makeup collection. And I had a lot of comments on that video saying, Chelsea, you know, indie brands make this type of formulation all the time, and I will be the first to admit I do not have a lot of eyeshadows from indie brands. And so for me, this was a first for me. But then I began to like think about it, and I said, but this is a first for the industry too, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because although we have seen these formulations from other brands and you all have experienced them, have we seen them in a palette for the price that this palette is? And that is what I think makes this palette so, like, it's a step up above the other ones, because other brands will create formulations like this and they're charging $17 to $25 per eyeshadow, and they are worth it, like hands down worth it. This eyeshadow palette retails for $125, and the price tag is hefty, like it's no walk in the park. But we get so many eyeshadows, we get face powders, and we do not lack on the formulation for a very, if I could say, reasonable price for the formula that we're getting. So please take that into context. I'm not saying $125 is a reasonable price, but for what we're getting, Danessa put it in a palette, made it accessible in terms of making it in a palette form. And for me, I love this color story. I love this array of eyeshadows. These 4 larger face powders in the middle, well, you know, eyeshadows are face powders. I love that on the back she put the actual tones of them, because when you look at them in the pan, they all have like a white look to them. And you can see to an extent like the shifts in them, but you can look on the back of the palette and you're like, oh yeah, these are the actual like tones of the eyeshadows or face powders. This palette truly left me speechless and so emotional. And like I said, it reignited my love for makeup artistry. So this is my most favorite palette that has come out in 2021. Celestial Odyssey is such a close second because of, like I said before, it does everything that I want it to do. If I wanted an everyday look, I'm not looking for Danessa's. For that everyday look, I would reach for Pat McGrath's. But this palette is the one that just, like I said, it just reignited a fire for me. So those are my favorite palettes that have come out this year or that I purchased this year that were new to me. And I did purchase other eyeshadow palettes, but like that were my favorite. Now my honorable mention one, and I say it's an honorable mention because I actually bought this one last year, but I love on this one so much. Every time I travel, I'm bringing this one, even if I don't think I'm going to use it, but I bring it with me. And I've talked about it a lot, so I have to include it in this video as a favorite of this year. And we have the Tom Ford Nude Dip eyeshadow palette. This one, it is just, when I say this is like my favorite quad, absolutely no questions asked, my favorite quad of all time. I get so many compliments every time I wear this eyeshadow palette, and I always laugh because the eyeshadow looks legit take me like 2 to 5 minutes. 5 minutes if I'm just moving slow. They take no time to put these colors together and create a look. But every time I do it, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna throw a little eyeshadow on and keep it moving. And you're like, what is on your eyes, Chelsea? What is that? And I'm like, I know, it's such a cute palette. It's such a cute quad. It does the job. The formula is amazing. It's the wet dry formula that Tom Ford has like come and coined and like we have come to love. And I love it. It is my honorable mention because I got it last year, but I still use this palette like all the time. This is kind of like a Biba palette for me. Like no matter what else I talk about as in terms of what I love, what my favorites are, like Nude Dip is still here. Nude Dip is still gonna be like a favorite of all times, you know, as each year goes on. This is a palette that, like, if I can't get through it and it gets kind of dry and the formula changes, I'm going out and buying another one. Like, it's just that palette for me. So those are my favorite palettes. I would love to hear what your #1 eyeshadow palette is from this year, whether it came out this year or you purchased it this year and you cannot put it down. What is that #1 palette? I would love to hear it in the comment section below. And if you've made it to this point in the video and you have yet to subscribe to my channel, I would love for you to consider subscribing and joining the Glam Girl Squad. And guys, that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope to see you in my very next video. Bye, guys.